Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love these watches, email me at tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, this is not a comparison so much as a showcase of two watches that I just happen to have in stock. I have both of the original versions of the Saxonia family, a Lange Söhne Lange 31. Between these two watches, we have 62 days of potential power reserve. The Platinum model launched at SIHH 2007. 2 years later, in 2009, the Rose Gold model debuted. They are dimensionally and mechanically identical, but we're going to do wrist shots of both. Let's start with the original. Now, this watch has a head unit only mass of over 230 grams. That's not even including the full Platinum clasp. So I'm going to throw this watch on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and immediately you'll see this watch is a little too big for me. I think your wrist needs to be 17 or even 18 centimeters circumference to wear it well. It's not super thick compared to other watches with extended power reserves, but it is still too thick for a dress cuff. I believe you need that bigger wrist because you can see on my 16 centimeter wrist, the lugs are overlapping the edge of my wrist, and you can see that best from over the top. One more shot down the barrels just so you get a better perspective of this, and it is incredibly heavy. Now we'll do a wrist shot of the Rose Gold model. The Rose Gold model is more Miami and Riviera, whereas the Platinum model is more New York and London. So this is a little bit more tropical. It's got a little bit more visual heat to it, and depending on your preference in case material, your physical location, things like skin tone and personal aesthetic sensibility, you may find one or the other to be more attractive, but keep in mind they are not identically finished. This is a very subtle difference, but you can see how the mid-case of the Rose Gold model is all polished. Well, the mid-case of the Platinum model is actually satinated for contrast. So just keep that in mind. They're not body doubles in different metals. There are some detail differences. Let's take a look at this clasp. Many Lange flagship pieces actually come with a pin buckle. Heavier and more expensive models, and I do mean much more expensive, can come with deployant clasps. This buckle was developed for the Lange 31. You can see it has twin triggers, so it only pops open if you press both triggers. It cannot fly open because you throw your hands up into the air at a football game or a baseball game. You can also see internally it features a combination of media blasting and polish, and then there's a little screw that actually releases a lateral slide that detaches the clasp from this bracket that mates to the strap. And you can see how it uses 1, 2, 3 lugs to mate to the strap. This is designed to be fail-safe secure. Rolling around to the case, it's typical Lange. We have a cylindrical case, a domed bezel, and lugs that are stepped out from the case band. You can also see that the case back is somewhat cupped and recessed, so the watch doesn't look as thick as it is when it's on the wrist. It's still thick, but not as dramatic as the calipers would imply. We have a crown with the Lange logo on it, a Lange Söhne, and of course, the bezel is domed. It's a fairly minimal and, if I'm going to be honest, generic case that you'll find almost everywhere in the Lange collection except on the Odysseus. But that's okay because it's what's inside that counts. Lange is all about dials and movements. By the way, fun fact, if you look on the reverse of the case, you'll see CO, that's Centror. That is a Swiss-based case maker owned by Audemars Piguet, which is why this German-made watch features a Swiss hallmark on it. Back to the dial side. The dial is a solid disc of sterling silver, like something that would issue from the U.S. Mint. So the dial is all precious metal. The hands, as well as the indices, are white gold. So is the frame for the date. We have a pusher that allows you to quickly cycle the date, and the feel of the pusher is world-class, like a fine column wheel chronograph, like a dotograph. We have a power reserve indicator, 31 days. That's right, 744 hours of power reserve. We have a little crosshair sub-register for constant seconds, and yes, it does feature a stop seconds function. The hands for hours, minutes, and power reserve are alpha style and polished white gold. Now, what I've never previously shown on one of these videos is how you actually wind this watch. No matter how many turns you issue, you will not be able to wind this watch. You cannot wind it with the crown. You must wind it instead with a ratcheting torque wrench that comes with the watch. First of all, it has a ratchet. So once you plug it into the case back, you don't have to keep inserting it, the better to preserve the finish of your watch. You can hear that it ratchets, but it's a torque wrench. At a preset torque level, which corresponds to the limit of the mainsprings, it will stop turning the mainsprings. It will start slipping internally. So you cannot overwind the watch with this winding tool. Let's show you how this works. You stick it into the little slot, And what's nice is that unlike many long power reserve watches, this is fairly high geared given the mechanical advantage of the winder. So as I wind it, you can see the power reserve indicator moves quickly. It doesn't take all day to wind this watch, and you don't need to resort to something comical like the power tool that you get with the Hublot La Ferrari. So you can wind this fairly easily. And of course, the system works exactly the same on the rose gold model. Let's take a look at the case backs. As you can see, not much changes. Different serial numbers, that's it. Taking a quick look at the movement. It's caliber L034.1. So what does that mean? Well, at Lange, 03 means that's the year work started on the movement. The 4 means that was the 4th movement they started that year. And the 1 just means it's the first revision of this movement. It is huge. It has 2 stacked mainspring barrels. Each barrel is 25 millimeters in diameter. Each mainspring is 1,850 millimeters, which is just over 6 feet long. So we have over 12 feet of mainspring in this watch. That's a lot of force, so we have a constant force mechanism. Similar to the locking lever with the 2 third wheels and the intermediate hairspring that you find on the Zeitwerk, this is a constant force device to ensure that you don't overdrive the escapement, causing overbanking, knocking, and ultimately the destruction of the escapement. What this does is it ensures that you get constant force to the escapement and constant amplitude, whether the watch has 1 day of power reserve remaining or 31. We can have our cake and eat it too, power reserve and consistency. The watch features 62 pivot jewels. The movement, by the way, is huge. Just the movement is 37 millimeters in diameter and 10 millimeters thick, which helps to explain the size of the case. The movement by itself is the size, well, bigger than a Rolex 36 millimeter Datejust. That is a moving movement, and you will find yourself emotionally moved, as there is beauty within this case. All 30 meters water resistant, please don't swim with it. It's 5-position adjusted like a chronometer, and it has German silver bridges, nickel copper zinc, the copper giving these bridges and plates their golden hue. We have stripes. We have engine turning on the base plate. We have a freehand engraved balance cock that is done with a burin and eye-hand coordination. We have mirrored anglage, or beveling, on the edge of the bridges. We have black polishing on the center that holds the arbor to the barrels, as well as black polishing on certain screws, the cover of the escape wheel cock, and the swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism and the stud holder. The watch features both black polished screws and fired blued screws, and you can see satination on the barrels, which also include anglage on their edges. You can even see their outermost face has been black polished. We also have fine finish on the metal components of the remontoir constant force device, which you can just barely see. It is a festival for the eyes and for the intellect. And yes, it features stop seconds. You can halt the progress using the stop seconds function and set this watch very precisely. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.